All right, everybody. Appreciate you guys stopping by. The Highway Marketing Allen and Heath Avantis D Live, or excuse me, Avantis demo. My name's Wes Pitzer. This is my first live stream event, so bear with me. Hopefully, you guys will get everything you need out of this. We're going to try to run through this as quickly as possible. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the Highway Marketing YouTube channel so you can keep up with all the different things that are going on and all the different live streaming events that we're going to be doing. We're going to continue to do a lot more of this. And you can also go to highwaymarketing.com where we have a page set up that has a lot of online content and we'll have links to our live events as they go along. So let's see here. So we're going to be talking about the Allen and Heath Avantis console. So let's talk about some of the key features. It's a 64 channel 42 bus digital mixer, 42 freely assignable buses. It uses the XCVI 96K FPGA core in there. It's a compact design that has this super tough die-cast chassis, and we'll look at that a little bit closer here in a bit, but it makes it a really robust and solid chassis while staying lightweight. It's got two 15.5 full HD touchscreens. The continuity UI adds a kind of a seamless blend between the hardware and the software, and we'll take a look at that. You'll be able to see that there. Deep enabled. These are the same plugins that you'll find on the world-class D-Live console. There's 12 stereo effects engines, an S-Link port that allows full access to the Everything I/O ecosystem. There's local I/O, both analog and AES, two full-size I/O card slots, which are capable of 128 by 128 channels each, and the integrated stereo recording via USB. So looking at the top of the console, you see the two big touchscreens there. There's the custom rotaries down the side, Softkeys everywhere. You have 6 layers on there, and there's fader illumination. Something that the guys in engineering at Allen, he figured out pretty quickly is these two giant touchscreens put off a lot of light. So where you need to focus light is not on the top of the console, but across the faders. So they put that fader illumination there so you can see your faders, see everything that's going on there. Looking at the back of the console, there you can see the 12 analog and 2 stereo AES outputs, the 12 inputs with 1 stereo AES input, the USB jack for stereo recording, doing your firmware updates, show, library storage, the word clock I/O that you can switch between in and out so you can sync to or from the console. The S-Link port for expander, the I/O expansion, also ME system if you choose to use that. Network connections for IP controllers and network hardware, and those 2 I/O ports, again, capable of 128 by 128 on each one of them. So we were talking about the chassis a little bit earlier. There's a kind of a sexy view of it that shows, it kind of looks like a racing motorcycle, and it kind of serves the same purpose, lightweight but strong. And that's kind of the whole point of this, is to keep the weight down but keep it really, really strong and rugged. Now the continuity UI that we were talking about, you can see here it adds kind of a seamless spin through from the hardware through to the software. So it's very easy for somebody just walking up to the console, volunteers, that kind of thing, to really be able to see how everything runs through there. And talking about the effects, these are the same effect algorithms that you're going to find on the D-Live system. So, and remember I said there's 12 stereo effects in there. Now the console we're going to be looking at here in a second is loaded up with our D-Pack. Now, right out of the box, this thing sounds great, but I highly recommend you add in the D-Pack. What that's going to do for you is give you a bunch of additional processing. I'm kind of a compressor nerd, so this is one of the things that I'm really into whenever I'm using this thing. But you also get the Dyne8 Dynamics processor. You can run up to 16 instances on this, those deep compressors that I love, and the dual valve stage preamp. The great news about this is once you add this pack on there, you're going to get all of the updates forever and free of charge. So it's really kind of a no-brainer. So what comes in the D-Pack? Well, you're going to get, as I said, 16 of the Dyne8s, which if you're not familiar with the Dyne8, it's a 4-band dynamic EQ and 4-band multi-band compressor. You can put that anywhere, inputs, outputs on any insert. You also get the deep compressors, which a few of them are listed there, and I'll take a look at those when we're actually pushing around on the console. This is actually one of my favorite things because, again, I love compressors. And that dual valve stage. Now, also, when you get your console, make sure you register so you can get the 3 graphic EQ emulations and the tube preamp. That's just, you get both of those things for free just for registering the thing. Now, of course, we have iPad control with the Avantis MixPad app, but let's take a look at those I/O ports that I was talking about on the back of the system. It's the same size as the D-Live I/O that you can buy, I/O cards that you can buy separately. So here's a few of the things that we have available. Starting over on the left, we've got 2 different versions of the Dante card. One is 64 by 64, one's 128 by 128. Both of them can run at 96K. Through the middle, there's a Waves card. That's actually a 3-port card there. Below that is Allen & Heath's proprietary Giga-Ace protocol, which allows for, again, 128 by 128 at 96K. Then over there on the right-hand side, we've got the Super MADI card, which allows for 128 by 128 MADI on BNC and on fiber. Then down below that, we have the Fiber Ace card, which is the same thing as the Giga-Ace card, but you've got fiber ports on there for those longer runs. Now, talking about the everything I/O that we have going on there, there's a huge amount of I/O options that are available that you can pull off of the S-Link or Dante. These are a few of the examples here, everything from the earlier AR and AB series boxes all the way up through the GX4816. So all kinds of options on how you can expand it. So let's look at an example of how you can expand your system. So just coming off of that one S-Link port and going into a GX4816 with the DX012 and a DX168, that's going to give you 64 by 36 on the stage, plus your 12 and 12 up at front of house. So lots of expansion, lots of things that you can do there. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual console itself, and I'm going to apologize in advance if you see some reflection on this. I'm doing this as most people are working from their home office these days. That's where I'm at, so I'm trying to do my best to make this happen for you. But here you will see the touchscreen. There's 2 touchscreens, like I said. My camera setup, you're going to see the right side touchscreen, which is basically the exact same thing as the left side touchscreen, but I wanted to make sure that we could zoom in. That way you guys could see everything. And I have another view here that's going to show the fader layout and some of the hardware buttons, and I'll bounce back and forth between those 2 things. So looking here, we're going to start at the top and go through all of your options for your pop-out box for setup. But you can see here we're in the bank view, and this is the way that I've set the bank up. Something that runs through the entire FPGA series of Allen & Heath consoles is the ability to drag and drop any fader anywhere on the surface. So this setup that you see here is not something that is a factory setup. This is how I set up the system because this is how I like to work. That's one of the great things about Allen & Heath is they understand that everybody works a little bit differently, so they try to allow you to have full customization so you can set it up however you want. But in the bank view, it's just going to show your banks. First thing we're going to look at is the processing. And this is a good time to point out that we're looking at your signal flow. So we've got preamp to filter, filter to gate, gate to your first insert point, then your parametric EQ, compression, second insert point, and your input delay. This is also a good opportunity to point out how much customization is available within the Allen & Heath ecosystem. You see there's some options down here, and there's actually a button called Options. Anybody who's worked on a D-Live before, they might recognize that as the setup key. So if you hold this down, it's going to allow you to change things based on the way you want to work. So let's say, for example, that I didn't want my parametric EQ before my compressor. I wanted it afterwards. So I can hold this button down. Any place where you see a gear is something you can customize, and that's going to change depending on where you are within the console. So here you see I can hit channel options. And now I can change the order of that either on a channel by channel or a global basis. So just a quick look at some of the things that you can do with the system for customization. Now, you do have a library, as I said before, where you could drop in a dual stage valve. If you have the D-Pack, once you register it, you've got your tube stage there that you can drop in there. Lots of different options on things that you can do. So that's your preamp. You can pull from anywhere. Any socket on the system can be attached to any channel, and any channel can be dropped on any fader. So very, very customizable based on your needs. There's your filter. I'm going to point out you can change the slope on that. This is your gate section. This is a really interesting thing that I love on consoles is the histogram that we have here. So you can see down here at the bottom, hopefully, you can see down here at the bottom that it's kind of grayed out. That's because I don't have the gate in. If I kick it in, it goes into red. But what that allows you to do is you can actually, and I'm going to try to simulate the gate opening and closing here. You can see what the gate is doing in real time before you ever even put it in. So that way you can fine tune your gate, make sure that it's working the way you want to, and then kick it in. So histogram is really handy. And of course you can key it from anywhere, and you have high and low pass filters to be able to jump in and out there. First insert point in the channel, obviously before your parametric EQ, compression, and all that business. Let's take a look at the Dyne-8. This is a good opportunity to drop one of those in there, and you can take a look at it. So the Dyne-8, as I said before, is four groups of multi-band compression and 4 dynamic EQ points. So if you're looking at the multi-band compression, that's there. Dynamic EQ is there. And you can obviously use these independently, but you get 16 of these that you can drop on any insert, either inputs or outputs. Very, very powerful setup there. Parametric EQ, of course, you can drag around, or you can pick out, your frequencies and do it on a knob if you would like. Completely up to you. Okay. Compressors. This is, again, as I said earlier, this is my favorite spot. So you have a histogram down here at the bottom, the same as you do on the gate, but you go into your library, and this is where you can go in and pick things. So let's just pick one of my favorite compressors on here, the Peak Limiter 76 in both black and silver face versions, with, of course, the all-in or nuke setting that we all love on drum buses. You could probably see I have a slam group down here that is running the Mighty compressor on there, but that's one of those things. Also want to point out that you have built-in parallel path on every one of these compressors in the chain, and all of this stuff is available on every single. These compressors are available on every single input and output. So you don't have to worry, because of the FPGA engine, you don't have to worry about your system slowing down because I'm using too many of these plugins. These add no latency. They are also, you could use an 1176 on all 64 channels and all 42 output buses if you want to. You're not going to see a change in the quality of the audio other than you're running that many Peak Limiter 76s. So anyway, the parallel path thing is really cool, so you can do a wet-dry mix. Second insert point, same as the first, it's just post compression. And then your input delay, which you have access to all of your input delay for all of your channels, because if you're delaying one, you're probably going to want to delay more than one. And I know somebody's going to ask. So 341.32 milliseconds of input delay. Okay, routing. This is something that when I talk about the D-Live specifically, I call it the big fat routing button. This is a very, very important button, which makes your entire life easier. So by pushing this, you can see I'm on a channel view. You can see I've got it selected here. By pushing this, you can see the routing for that channel. So I can look at this and see if I would like to look. You can either scroll or you can touch over here on the side to jump around, but I can see all my matrices. I can see my main, where I'm at on that. It's going to the effects, all my routing. I can see my DCA. I can see my direct out pickoff point, and I can also see the level on my direct out. So that's a huge thing to be able to do. This routing button also is how the easiest way I think that you could route to a DCA. So if I select this DCA, now I can see across the top everything that can be sent to that DCA, which is pretty much everything, and I can just pick things if I want them to be in that DCA. So, and it's going to be the same thing for groups and matrices and all that. You can just select that thing that you want to route things to and from, hit the big fat routing button, you're ready to go. I/O section. This is a spot where some people, because there's so many options on how you can send things and receive things from anywhere on the network, there's a lot going on here, and it can be confusing to people, but it's really not. All you have to think about is, what am I trying to accomplish? So for example, I'm on the Outputs tab. If I'm trying to route an output to a socket, well, I take that mix that I'm trying to route, be it a matrix C or a, left, right, or whatever. And where is it going? Is it going to the local outputs that are built into the console? Am I trying to send it out an I/O port? Is it going down the S-Link? So as long as you know what you're trying to do, then you just touch it and make it be that thing. I'd also like to point out, for those of us, much like me, whose eyes aren't what they used to be, this is fully, you can pinch to zoom, you can see everything a whole lot easier, and that's a great thing for those of us who can't really, our eyes aren't what they used to be. Let's say that. So inputs, same kind of deal. Just know what you're trying to do. You're trying to take an input channel and you're trying to route that to a socket. So just make sure you know what you're trying to do. Tie lines are one of those things that I get asked a lot of questions about, and it's really fairly simple once you think about it. Any old school guys understand what tie lines are. So this is a way to split a signal off immediately after the analog to digital conversion. So you've got a preamp, and the next thing in line is the analog to digital converter. And then this is where you could split off from that with zero processing going on that, and sending it to somewhere else for like a monitor split, broadcast split, both, however you want to do it. And it's pretty easy when you think about it. Over here on the left-hand side, you have your inputs and what you're trying to send to an output. So for example, let's say, which I have a Dante card in my I/O port 1 there. Let's say I wanted to take a local socket here and split it off to send to monitor world that's coming off of my Dante card. So I've got the Dante card as my output, where it's going, and the local inputs are where I'm pulling that from. And then I would just route those channels accordingly. If I wanted channel 1 to go to channel 1 on the Dante stream, all I would have to do is hold down the patch here and touch 1. Now, it's warning me that I'm trying to reassign something, which I don't want to do, but that's exactly how you would do it. So hopefully that all made sense. Virtual sound check. This is, we have a single button virtual sound check here. All you have to do is select which port that audio is coming in on. Again, I have a Dante card on I/O port 1, which is what I use for virtual sound check. When I hit this button, it's going to go into virtual sound check mode. So what you can see when I exit out of here is there's a little VS that's blinking. You can't see it over on this other screen over here, but it's blinking over there as well. So you're in virtual sound check mode. So if I touch there, it immediately takes me back to this spot so I can turn it on and off. It also has, that's also where the record send is, and so you can literally, like with my rig, I have Dante virtual sound card running on a laptop. I connect one network cable to it running Reaper, and I can record straight to that, and when I'm done, I can hit virtual sound check and hit play and send it right back into the system. It's one of the best things for obviously virtual sound check for touring artists, but also when you think in the church market, training volunteers by recording your show and then having them come in on a day when your church isn't full and having it play back and then be able to mix is a really incredible teaching tool. Okay, ganging. This is, I like to call this stereo channels on steroids. We all think about stereo channels as being odd, even. Everything is, in this parlance, gang together except for the pans, which one of them is panned hard left and one of them is panned hard right. What ganging allows you to do is they don't have to be odd even pairs. They can be anything. They can be multiple things as long as they're the same thing, like input to input or whatever mix you're using to mix. You can gang those things together and then you pick what attributes are actually following each other. So for example, I could go in here and pick channel 38 and channel 46 and channel 42 and gang all those together, and then I pick what attributes I want those things to follow each other. It's really powerful, really flexible. Use this a lot on festivals because that festival patch, I know everybody's input list that they send is always accurate, but every once in a while that doesn't happen. So I need to be able to patch stereo channels on the fly that aren't together, and being able to do this, mid-show is a really great feature. Here's your metering page. You've got meters for everything: inputs, effects, mix. You also have some user definable metering So if you hit the options, you can go in here and just drag and drop whatever you want into there to make your own user page. You have 4 of those, and that's where your RTA lives with a signal generator that you can select from. Effects, as I said, you have 12 effects engines that you can drop whatever you want to in there. If you want to change an effect, just go into select that slot, whatever slot that might be, go into your library, select what kind of effect you want, and then in each one of those, there are a bunch of factory presets that you can choose from. You can also build your own by going Store New, and that's going to give you your own user preset. You can set up, your reverb exactly the way you want to, or what have you. If I wanted to change this slot 1, I can just go in here and select echo and then recall that, and I have a nice vintage echo sound going on there. These models are really, really good. They sound great. Also, on every one of the 12 effects slots, you also have a parametric EQ built in, so you can EQ your effects. These are also faders as well, so you can drop them on your surface, as I said, fully customizable to do whatever you need to do. But that's the effects there. Let's see, what else have we got going on here? All right, scenes. This is one of the most powerful things that Allen Heath architecture allows for. Scenes. When you think about scenes, some people call them snapshots. It's all kind of the same thing. It's a thing you're going to do within your show. Your show is the container. Your scenes are the things that you store within your show. The way a lot of snapshots work is you set up a scope of what you're going to save. Say, for example, I want this scene to change an EQ. Then you say, save this EQ setting, right? The way that Allen Heath does it is a little different. They save the entire state, and then you use a recall filter to filter out the things that you don't want to happen within that scene. So it's really handy for, I made that EQ change, but I filtered it out, but I think I'd still kind of want to use it. You can just go in after you've saved your scene and open up that EQ, and it's there. So now you've got it. Recall filters are really, really one of the cooler features of the scene setup. So when you go to do a recall filter, you're going to see these skittles that I call them. What you're going to want to do is block all of these out and then go in and pick out the things that you want to do. If you want to filter out a bunch of things, this is how I would do it. So if you wanted to filter out everything but a specific channel, you could go in here and say, oh yeah, on channel 1, I want that to be the only thing that happens. Or you could get really granular with it and say, I want just the high pass filter on channel number 2, and I want the pan on channel number 3, and so on and so forth. So, and you've got a huge list of things that you can filter out, and it can get really, really granular there. So it allows for some really interesting use of scenes. I use them quite a bit on several different things to change everything from my fader layout to EQ settings and that kind of thing. There is an embedded recall for the theater guys as well that allows you to, when you fire off a scene, set a delay before the next scene fires off. Updating is very, very, very necessary when you've got the ability to have 500 scenes in a show. If you want to make a change to, say, you get a different bass player and you want to make a change to the compressor and the EQ setting, and you had 500 scenes in there, you don't want to have to go through there and do that individually. So this just allows you to be able to set parameters and update them without having to make changes all the way across. Your cue list editor allows you to set up exactly what it sounds like, a cue list. So say you wanted to take scene 5 today and scene 12 and scene 3 and scene 16, etc., and make that your cue list. If you go back to your scene manager, you notice I have all scenes or current cue list. I can just hit the current cue list and it's just those. So I can go next, go, next, go, next, go. You can also save those and manage those within the system. Global safes are kind of the opposite of recall filters. Global safes are things you never want to change within a show. So say maybe your patching or your soft buttons or something, you would set these up. So usually I safe none and then go in on a show-by-show basis and say, on this show, I'd never want my soft buttons or my illumination or my fader layout to change. So that's what these are. But this is a hugely, hugely powerful thing that I really don't even have time to explain everything that's going on here. But after we're done here, we'll do a little Q&A. And if you have some specific questions, hopefully I'll have some time to get to them. Setup, this is where you set up your console here. As I said before, the whole interface is based around being able to put whatever faders you want on whatever layer in any way possible. So, for example, you can see I have an empty slot here. I could just grab channel 27 and drop it right there. Now I have channel 27 there. If I don't want it there, I can throw it away. And you can do that with your effects, your mix, DCAs, whatever. Drop them anywhere you want to, and that's across the whole console. Something that's new on the Avantis console that you might not have seen before is this lock master strips. You probably noticed these are a different color, these 4 over here. When you lock your master strips, this allows you to drop like 4 outputs that you like to use as your master strips. You can lock those in place there, and they're a little different color. That's, again, great for somebody who's not used to the architecture of anything can be anywhere. At least they always know when they lock this out that those outputs are going to be there. You notice mine's locked down with my left, right subs, my record, and my slam group for my drums. So very easy. I always say if you can work on an iPad, you can do this. Softkeys, there's 24 soft keys on this surface, and it allows you can set these up to be almost anything you want to. You'll probably notice here I've got a couple of mute groups over here. On 16 I've got my tap tempo, but I mean you can do all kinds of things with these. Everything from your automatic mic mixing control, muting, firing off specific scenes, doing next go for your scenes, activating your DCA spills, talkback assign, that kind of thing. I mean, there's a huge amount of things, and you've got a lot of room to move on that. Surface preferences, this is where I'll show you when we get to the surface, where you can set up your 3 custom rotary buttons, and you can set up your channels. You'll see here that I have my first 3 mono effects sends on here, so I can just hit a button and my rotaries become a send on that channel, which I'll show you when we get to the actual fader side of it. But a lot of options. You can link your layers together. Dimmer, this just handles exactly what it sounds like, how bright everything is, and the colors of your fader illumination there. DCA spills, if you're not familiar with them, a lot of manufacturers do this, but it's exactly like what it sounds like. You can spill out your DCAs. So by hitting the mix button on a DCA, it will actually spill out what's in that DCA, so you can jump to it very, very quickly. I use these all the time. This is one of my favorite things about it, and I can kind of bounce back and forth so you can see what I'm talking about there. So I have my DCA right here. If I hit this mix button here, and I'm going to jump over to the other side so you can see it happening. Now I hit my mix button, and now you'll see those 7 channels that are in that DCA have spilled out over here. I hit the mix button again, and I'm back to normal. So it's a really quick and easy way to work through to enhance your workflow, and this is just setting up how you want those things to spill out. You do have custom rotaries down each side here, and this is how you can set those up. You'll see I've got mine set up as compressor over here and gate over on this side. So when you select a channel, if I touch a knob, you can see it'll pop out, and that's that pop out, the timing on that one as far as how it'll pop out, or I can hit the view button and it'll stay popped out. So I came up in the analog world, so I'm a knobs and fader kind of guy, so I like having that ability to be able to just grab something real quick in the heat of battle and be able to make changes on the fly. So your audio tab, this is where you set up your PAFL buses. There are multiple PAFL buses that you can set up on here. You can delay your PAFL, which I highly recommend if you're, especially on PAFL number 1, if you haven't delayed your headphones to your line array. Once you do, you're never going to stop doing that. There's a bunch of different options on here so you can change your PAFL settings, and this is where you set that up. IO port, this just shows the 2 IO ports on there. You'll notice mine has a Dante card in there. Audio sync, this is where you set up all that BNC word clock that I showed on the back, and your AES setups, clock source, that kind of thing. Metering, there is some chromatic metering in here, and this is where you set that up. Anybody who has an SQ is going to be familiar with how chromatic metering works. You also have your ballistics for your meters here that you can change and set the peak hold time and all that. And never fear, if you mess it up massively, there's a factory reset to take it back to factory. So source selection has to do with the IP1, which is a network control piece. Anybody who has any DLive experience knows about the IP range, but this is just how you set up that source selection for the IP1s, and then you can route them and set the output. Automatic mic mixing. There's a couple of different styles of automatic mic mixing that they have. We have the basic D Classic and then the number of open mics. All you have to do is go in and drag in here. There's 64 channels of automatic mic mixing that you can break up into 1, 2, or 4 rooms. And then you just drag and drop whatever channels you want in there. And then you've got your automatic mic mixing set up. I'm not going to throw them on there because I always forget to turn it off when I go to use the console and wonder why my console's acting so weird. So configuration, this is actually the first spot that I go to. This is where you set up your output buses. Remember I said there's 42 output buses here. You go in and choose what you want those output buses to be. Now, word of warning, I say this every time on DLive as well. When you go to set these up, when you make that change, you are going to interrupt your audio because you're reconfiguring that FPGA engine at its core level. So audio is going to stop. So please, please, please never do this in the middle of a show. This is contained at that show level that I was talking about. So, you know, if you have different configurations that you want to use, save them each as an individual show and do it before the show starts because it is going to interrupt audio. You have been warned. If you do it in the middle of the show and lose your job, not my fault. Input stereos, this is where you set up the standard inputs, your odd, even kind of thing. Again, this does this at that base FPGA level. If you do this on the fly, you will again interrupt audio. So if you need to make some changes like that in the middle of a show, use ganging. It's the same thing and it won't interrupt your audio. Name and color, this is where you can go through and change like groups of things. If you mix by color, like if you want all your drums to be red or whatever, you can go and set that up here. Also, by the way, when you want to change the name, I had somebody call and ask me this because it wasn't readily apparent to them, but if you want to change the name of an individual channel, the easiest way to do it is see this green box when you select something, it pops up in the corner telling you what you're on. If you just touch that, you can type out whatever you want and change individual colors, but doing it here, you can do groups like a start and end point where you can go. So network, this is going to, this is where you can set up, because this is a truly networkable piece. It has an IP address. I highly recommend, if you don't know what you're doing here, don't mess with it. If you do know what you're doing, we can go into this a little bit more offline, but my advice, just don't mess with it. User profiles, you have one admin and then 9 different levels of use where you can go in and set permissions, and it can get really, really granular here. So, you know, I have a lot of guys that'll set up like an A1 and volunteer level of thing to allow you to do that. But you have 9 that you can choose from, that you can password protect. You can even fire off a scene when they log in. This add-ons button shows you what add-ons you have. Notice I have the free registration and the DPAC. Your talkback, this is where you set up your talkback, where it's coming from, high pass, filter it, turn it on and off, that kind of thing, and then you can assign it to different places. I usually bring mine on a channel, but you know, it's up to you how you do it. Mute groups, this is where you go in and set up your 8 different mute groups. You can put anything in a mute group. You can mute and baffle from here, but as I said, you can also use a soft button, which is what I do to mute things, and this is where you set that up. Signal generator, again, you have that same signal generator that you saw on the RTA, and you can assign those to individual places if you would like to send that out. Controllers, this is where you set up your IP controllers. Remember I said that you have the IP1 for the source selection. There's also IP6, IP8, and GPIO. If you're unfamiliar with any of these things, I encourage you to go on the Allen and Heath website and just start poking around. There's some really cool things. I use the IP6 all the time for setting up wireless in-ear control, and it's as simple as going in here to the quick setup and dragging and dropping things onto there. In that case, for wireless in-ears, doing sends on knobs basically for that and dropping those on there. You can even simulate it to make sure that it's functioning the way you think it's going to function. So that's in your setup. Now let's go over to the utility button. This is, if you're familiar with the DLive, this is the home screen that you're used to seeing. It's under the utility now, but this gives you the spot where you power down your Surface, lock it, switch user, that kind of thing. Memory, this is where you're going to store your shows. If I had a USB plugged in here, which I guess I probably should have, you would see the shows over here on this side. This is what's stored on the actual Surface itself. You can recall from a USB. You don't have to download it to the Surface, and you can drag and drop things back and forth, copy back and forth there. Library Manager, this is where you're going to get those libraries that I said you would save. This is where it would save them, either on the console or USB, and moving things back and forth. So basically, you can have a USB that you save all of your show and your library information and everything, all your setup on a USB, walk in front of anybody's Avantis, drop it in there, recall that show, bam, you're up and running, and it's just like it's your console. Utilities, this shows everything that's happened since the console's been turned on. You set your date and time here. Calibrate your faders from here. It's pretty self-explanatory, and this is where you're going to update the firmware. I'd like to point out we're on firmware version 1.02, so very early in the development of this, and because of the FPGA architecture, I know from experience with the D-Live, there's so many features that they can add on here, and they're constantly developing. So definitely stay tuned for as more and more things come out here. Here's your MIDI controls that it's kind of self-explanatory there. USB audio, this is something that is new to the Avantis. You'll notice that it has, here's those chromatic metering, that chromatic metering I was talking about, and you'll notice that there's hard drive space now. So you can actually store things and write things to the hard drive, and that'll help ease your USB recording and make it a little bit easier for that throughput. But here's where you can set up where it's coming from, and your record bus. There's your recordings and that USB drive if you have it plugged in. So really cool options there. So we'll pop this back out and I'll show you a couple of other things. We have listen options, a button that says name, and help. Listen, let's say for example, you've got a channel going on and you've done all this processing on it, and now you're starting to get distortion, but you don't know, is it the tube pre that I put on there causing this distortion I don't like? Is it coming from the compressor? Where is that coming from? Well, if you hold down this listen bus, you'll notice you see all these headphones. That means that you can listen at that point in the signal chain. So I can listen to, on the Paffle bus, just the preamp, or I can go through here and listen at the point where the compressor is, and you'll notice that there's some blinking headphones up here. Just touch that to turn it off, but very handy feature. Options we kind of went through, that's the setup button. This name, you'll notice that there's just a name on my channels here. I can cycle through to where it has the dB level down at the bottom, or my I/O, where it's coming from. Is it a local? Is it on an S-Link port? That kind of thing. So very easy. The help button's kind of self-explanatory. When you touch that, depending on where you are, it'll pop up. So let's pop this out and look at the preamp. You'll notice how things change. It's not going to teach you how to use the console, but it's a nice, quick, easy reference of what does that thing do? So, okay. So that's a really quick version of the software. We'll jump back over to the hardware for the last couple of things that I wanted to show you guys. You can see there's some extra buttons and knobs going on over here, so I'm going to run through each one of these. One of the things that I really like about all of the Allen and Heath software is the ability to do things quickly and easily. So I'm going to select an aux over here and hit a mix. Now this pre and post, remember I talked about the big fat routing button. So let me select this and go to the routing button so you can see these things happening. So let's say I wanted to make all 64 of these channels pre instead of post. Well, you notice they're all post here. Now I could certainly go through here on each individual one and turn them from pre to post, right? But there has to be an easier way. And there is, and that's what that pre button is. So if I hold down this pre button and then go over here and touch, it says pre-post all. You see how it changed there? Touch it again, they all go to post. So that button allows you to do everything on that aux or whatever output bus it may be able to do those all quick and easily. Safes, remember I was talking about the global safes in the scenes. This just allows you to be able to hold down this button, and you can see there's lots of different places where I can safe things from. I can safe those individually just by holding down this button, so I don't have to go into that menu if I'm in the middle of a show and I'm like, oh, this pastor mic needs to be safed here, from any potential thing that could go wrong. Well, I can just hit that on the fly and I don't have to worry about it. Freeze is the button that allows you to be able to freeze a channel in place. So you've got, say you've got a channel here that you never want to move. Well, if I hold down the freeze button, I can hit this little lock, which I think you might be able to see easier there. There's locks on there, but I can hit this little lock and it says frozen. And now as I go through each one of these, you'll notice that that channel does not move. If I hold down the freeze button and unfreeze it, now it's unfrozen in place. Okay, last couple of things that I want to go through here. We've got copy, paste, reset. Copy is great, and it's actually a really quick workflow thing. You can not only copy individual EQs, compressors, all of that stuff. You can copy a channel. So you could say, okay, here's a bass channel that I want to set up and just apply it across everything. If I wanted to do something like that, I'd hold down the copy button. And when I do, you can see down here at the bottom that I can copy all of the processing for something. So I could just tap, I'm going to tap something over on this side. So I tapped channel 1. And then if I hold down paste, you'll notice the only thing that pops up is because I did the channel processing, I can hit there. So if I wanted to apply that processing from channel 1 to here, you'll see how everything changed. So it's a really quick and easy. You can also use the copy button to be able to copy aux sends, for example. So you could set up aux number 1 when the band's coming in. You could set that up as kind of a starting point and then copy that and then paste that across 5, 6 other auxes, and that would give you a good starting point when you pull that fader up. So very, very cool. Also, reset button is super handy. What it's going to do is take whatever you touch to its base state. So for example, if I hold down the reset button, let's jump over here, and I'm going to jump into this EQ, and we'll say, oh yeah, this EQ is awesome. I want to use that in a bunch of different places, and then I go and use it and come to the realization, as obvious there, that that's terrible. So hold down the reset button. If I just touch it, bam, it's back to flat again. So very quick and easy. Also, by the way, one of the things my kids like the best is the fact that I can go through and hit the reset button, and it'll take faders down to 0 or down to infinity, or you can take them all to 0. It's a quick, easy way to do some fader moves there. Like I said, my kids love that. Last couple of things I want to talk about are these multi-use knobs here. Now you notice I'm using these that actually have a preamp attached to them, and I've got my gain button set up here, and they're lit up in red, and so they do what you think they're going to do. I can hit the pan button, and they become pan knobs. I can hit the sends button, and if I select like an aux, for example, now you'll notice it says subs. It tells you what aux that is, and now that's sends on knobs instead of sends on faders. If I bump that off, then I'm back on sends on faders. So a little different workflow, so you can do whatever you want to. And here's those 3 buttons that I talked about earlier that you can set up on your own to be your own things. Remember, I said I set them up as my first 3 effects sends. So if I hit that button, there's my first reverb, or actually what I changed to an echo piece. There's my second reverb. There's my third reverb, and now I'm back to gain. So it's a workflow situation. Try to make it as easy as possible for you to bounce around through there. So we're about 45 minutes into this. I think I've pretty much run through everything. I'll jump over here into the chat and see. Oh, sorry, I haven't been able to pay as much attention to the chat because I'm kind of hands-on over here. So let's see. We can open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions here, we can throw in there. Happy to answer. So let's see what we got. It looks like Jalen's been pretty heavy. Thanks, man, for picking up the slack on me. So looking pretty good. Let's see, any other questions, guys? All right. Well, if there's not any questions, let's see. Yeah, okay. Well, I appreciate you guys coming to my first YouTube live stream. Hopefully you guys got some use out of it. This will be posted up on the Highway Marketing YouTube page here directly. Make sure that you subscribe, hit the like button, all of that stuff, and stay tuned as we're going to do more and more of this kind of thing. I appreciate you guys coming, and we will see you next time.